Five. Today, I have the great pleasure of Codie James. Good morning to you, Codie.
Good morning.
Good to see you. You are a management consultant. You're energetic, and we're gonna know that in a moment. You're an impactful and people-driven leader, known for improving commercial performance by putting customers and colleagues at the heart of transformational change. Today, we're going to be exploring the foundations for your success as a working mum, and look into how we can understand how you can thrive in an organization as a working mum as well within that. But before we get into that conversation, Codie, what do you love about what you do?
Well, that's the only question I knew you was going to ask me. So, actually, when I dropped my children off at school this morning, I was thinking about what is it that I really, really love. And I think what really resonated with me and came to mind was the fact that I'm a working mum. And I think both aspects of being an employee and a mum give me tremendous pride, a sense of purpose, and actually enormous pleasure. I think if I start with being an employee, a management consultant, I think it really aligns to my own purpose, and my purpose is very much to enable individuals and organisations to recognise and then reach their full potential. So I think, I've had a very successful and enjoyable career. I started in retail, spent a decade in retail, very fast paced environment. And then for the last 2 years, I moved into consulting. And I think, working in consulting really gives you the ability to co create solutions with clients to their most challenging transformations. So whether you're redesigning their operating model, or trying to adjust their culture, or looking at ways to remove wasted effort and cost. So I think in that sense, it very much aligns to my purpose. I also think as a leader of people and a newly qualified executive coach, I have this real pleasure of working with people and walking side by side with them to allow them to really become the very best version of themselves. And, I get real pride in seeing individuals really transform the way they operate and, to start and to fulfill their life. So I think from a work aspect, it's very much aligned to my purpose. And I think that's what gets me out of bed on the morning. That's the fire inside my stomach that just wants me to log on and to make things happen. So I think being able to find work that aligns to your purpose makes a massive difference.
Mm.
I think if I then look at the other part of my life, being a mum, I've got two little girls. I've got Charlotte and Emily. They're both thankfully at school now, which has made a significant improvement in the way I operate as a working mum. But I think for me, being an active parent is so important. I grew up in a very working class family where my mum was always at the school gates, and I think we've got that such a good relationship that I wanted to give that to my girls, but in a very different way. It was very important I had a career at the same time, but equally it's the small moments that matter to me. Being there on a Saturday morning at swimming, being able to take my eldest daughter to piano lessons, which she's just started, and being present, being there so they know they can always confide in me. And I think having both aspects, that's what really makes me thrive. And I guess to answer your question, that's what makes me happy. And I guess being very fortunate to have both. Some people aren't that fortunate, and I feel very privileged.
Mm. And we are going to be exploring almost this foundations of success, or what helps you sort of get to be successful. But I'd like to understand from your perspective, what is success for you, and how does that sort of play out? I mean, it's a very subjective thing, and obviously we impose success on other people as well by our own definition. I just want to understand from your perspective, if I'd say to you, how you're defining success, that I've got to the end of my life, career, whatever it is, and I think I've been successful. What would that be?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually. I think, being from a very working class background growing up, I never knew what I wanted to do in my career. I wasn't privileged to be around people with, diverse careers. The careers I saw was, people you access every day, from doctors to teachers, etc. So I think when I first started my career, I'll be honest with you, success was money. It was titles. It was, all of the things I wanted that my family didn't have. So I think that was my driver of success. I think as I've progressed through my career, and certainly now, it's about how can I make a difference to others. So I think that's both organisations and individuals. And I think when I'm on my deathbed, I'm not going to be sat there thinking, oh, look at my bank balance. It's going to be, who have I made a difference to? And I think you know big part of that is my children's life. I want to give them the best start in life possible, and give them, all of these ideas and inspiration, so they can go on and be successful in their life. So success to me is enabling individuals and organisations to be the very best version of themselves, and I think that perfectly aligns to my purpose. So yeah, I think it's that mind shift between actually, monetary income and status, to actually making a real difference. Yeah, so that's success to me.
And obviously, it's always sometimes difficult to measure things like making a
Mm.
difference in somebody. But how do you go about that in your day-to-day working environment? How do you make a difference? How do you know you're making an impact and helping people to become the best version of themselves? What is it you're doing as a leader in an
Mhm.
organization?
Well, it's quite interesting, actually. You've just prompted a thought that's come into my head. So I'm actually transitioning to a new organisation at the moment, and I will answer your question eventually. But I think this is quite a useful tip for organisations. So I'm actually joining an organisation called Sullivan and Stanley. I join next Tuesday, and what I've been blown away with by the organisation so far is actually my new boss. When I'd accepted, he organised and proactively got the two of us on a call like this with a strengths coach, and we worked together to understand our strengths and how we could complement each other, but the potential points where we could clash. And I think that ability to actually understand people, and to understand how they work together, is really beneficial. I think, in a day-to-day life, with organisations and working with individuals, for me, it's about in the moment feedback. So I work in quite high pressured, fast paced environments, and I always, at the beginning of every day, have a daily check in with my team, and at the end of the day, we set our goals, but we also at the end go, what went well and what didn't go well, and what do we want to do different as a result. And I think, a lot of individuals fear feedback. I think it's a gift. And actually, how do you encourage more people to be open, and to say it as it is, right? If we don't say it and we don't voice it, how can people change?
Yeah, and I've heard a lot that whole feedback is a gift, and sometimes it can be used a little bit of a. Um, I'm still going to give you something really not very nice here, but
Yeah.
it's you still got to position it well, still encourage people, still support people, and get to a place where, like all these things, it's built on relationship,
Mm.
isn't it? And you can almost you build that almost that trust bridge with people, and as the stronger that is, you can put more stuff over it in terms
Yeah.
of feedback, not being critical, but trying to encourage people with that
Mm.
intent to try and get people to be the better versions of themselves. So in terms of your in your mind, you're being successful, you're making a difference with people, you're helping people become the best version of themselves. um, how, as a working parent, working mum, however you want to term it, because it's both, it's not just working mums, what has helped you and enabled you to do that? Because unfortunately there is a perception that the mum stays at home and all that type of thing, sort of, and now that's starting to change, and people are being more, not just accepting, but are more aware of that. What are you finding initially when all that happened? The sort of, I guess, the challenges or potential obstacles that you faced
Mm.
in the organisations, and perhaps you're aware of other colleagues may have faced.
Yeah, I think the first challenge is the guilt. I think, before you have children, you can give much more in an organisation. You can be pretty much anywhere, anywhere at any time, in any place. So I think it's that transition between actually, you've got other people who depend on you now, and I think that's a real hard transition. I remember when I gave birth to my first little girl, Charlotte. I had my children quite young, and I remember holding her in my arms and thinking, wow, I'm now responsible for you, and just being overwhelmed with emotion that actually, it's more than just my career now. I need to give you everything you need, and you're highly reliant on me. So I think that guilt can really eat at you, because I think if you've been so career focused like I was, and still am, actually, you've got this pull between, actually I want to be a great mom, and I want to be a really good employee, and I want both. So I think that guilt is really, really can become quite overwhelming. And I think I've been very fortunate that my husband, who I married, is my absolute biggest career advocate. So we work in complete partnership, and he does the majority of the things in the house. He's always there. If I need to be aware, he's present with the children. But still, there's this guilt. So let me give you an example. My mum is, a phenomenal grandma, a phenomenal mum, and but still, sometimes when I'm working away, she'll ring me and say, "Do you not feel guilty that you're not at home with the children?" And she doesn't mean it. It's just her outlook on life. And I think, those little snippets that, people are saying to you, you just got to, try and lock it out. But sometimes it can eat away at you. And I think, other women are also not sometimes not helpful. When my girls started school, one of the classes actually set up a WhatsApp group and called it a mums group, and I was like, can we call it parents group, please? My husband's quite involved in my children's life, and I'd like to see this, the messages. And I think it's that kind of perception that people put on women, that you have to do more than your equal share.
Yes, there is that. That's an interesting one. WhatsApp group, and he's there,
Yeah.
probably the only bloke, and going to those sort of gatherings with them. How did you deal with that guilt? And it must be is it an ongoing thing? I don't know. How do you work that through?
No, I think for me, somebody once gave me this piece of advice, which, has always stayed with me, and I probably won't get it word for word, but essentially what she said to me was, Codie, you can have both. You can have a career and be a mum. You just need to switch your mindset. If your children go to bed happy, with a full belly, and, they're loved, and they've got, they're in a warm house, you've done your job. And I think it's that mindset between, if my husband's at home doing that and they've got everything they need, it's okay that some days I'll be working away. And I think it's that mindset shift. And also, I think it helps, doing what you love. I never feel like I work. I feel like I'm really aligned to my purpose and I'm making a difference. So I think for me, when I'm in work zone, I'm in work zone. And when I'm at home, I'm present. So I think it's about having those, being present where you are. And I also think for me, the mindset shift between a work-life blend to a work-life balance. Actually, some days I might be at my computer and I might get a call that I need to pick my child up. And you just have to adapt and be resilient. And it's never going to be perfect, and it's always going to be messy, but how do you get through it, and how do you optimize your time the best you can? We all have 24 hours in a day, and I think one of the things I've done, and it was an exec coach I was spending time with, and he was coaching me at the time, said to me, outsource what you can, Codie, make your life easier, and optimize those 24 hours. And I think, again, being from a very working class background, it felt uncomfortable to have a cleaner and all those things, but actually it's made my life so much easier, because when I'm at home, I'm present with the girls. And I appreciate not everybody can afford that, but actually, if you're going out for meals and coffee, and where are you going to get the best satisfaction out of life? Is it putting the ironing away and cleaning up after the kids, or actually is it watching a movie or going for a walk?
Yeah, it is interesting about the mindset shift and reframing things, isn't it? And having a different perspective on something can just create, I suppose, an empowering sense, but also see things from a different point of view and make it a lot more positive and more engaging. What do you think from an employer perspective? Sorry, What would be there as a leader mindset shifts on when you're managing and working with working parents? So that's just broadening out. Just it's not just mums; there's dads as well that are working, and how to and you might work for somebody who doesn't have children. So, what sort of mindset shift do you think employers need to start doing or thinking about?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think firstly, if we think about the stats, it's to their advantage if they get it right. I think there's been a study by McKinsey I was having a read last night, that actually organisations who get diversity right, and win at diversity are 27% more profitable than those who don't. And I think if you then analyse, working mums, individuals who have babies, 17% of them leave the workforce within 5 years. So I think those statistics don't work for me right now. So I think from a leader's perspective, that it needs to be a massive cultural shift. I think there's things that they can do to model the right behaviours. I think for me, being a leader, I actively put things in my diary. So if I'm doing drop off or I'm doing pickups or I'm going to the school nativity play, I don't set it as private. I set it so everybody can see. And that's for me showcasing it's okay to do those things as long as you're delivering what's expected, and you're there when when it's an absolute must. So I think being visible, doing those things is really important. I think having great males who are very open about their children, and being active as well, so it's not just all on mum. So I think I've just left a fantastic organization called PA Consulting, and loved my time there. And one of the partners, very successful partner, whenever he was working late, his children would be sat on his lap, and they'd be colouring, or there'd be there'd be whatever they were doing, and he was very present, but his children was, and I just thought that was a really authentic way to show people, actually, I'm both a dad and a partner. So I think that visibility is really important. I think, promoting flexible working where applicable, promoting job share. And I think, a lot of organisations are nervous about job sharing, but actually I've seen this working incredibly well. How do you maximise two brains rather than one? And I think it's about individuals thinking about how do they get the best for the organisation and the individuals who work there. And I think, another aspect I always get frustrated about is when policies are changed or decisions are made. Have you got the right people around the table? Have you got the people, the diverse points of views, and are they all taken into account?
Yeah, you made a good point on the role modeling and your partner who was there with the children, and that being visibly role modeling is more powerful than actually saying anything or creating any policies. And I think as leaders to try and almost like walk the talk, so to speak, as opposed to just saying this is what we're doing. Now a lot of organizations know about the facts on diversity. They know the facts on supporting working parents, working mums, and how that really benefits not just the innovation and productivity, but it benefits profits as well. What do you think stops them embracing that? What do you think is the thing that gets in the way? Because we're not just talking, studies recently. It's been going for a long time, these studies, and there's a lot of data out there, and yet still some organizations don't seem to, for some reason, get it. And I don't know, what do you think? What is stopping them, do you think?
Good question. $1 million question. I think, a lot of organisations have the right intent to spend, a significant amount of time writing policies and visions and, coming up with these great ideas. But I think when the reality, of the high pressured environments or results are not where they need to be, they just go into such reactive mode of we must get this done and we must get it done now, that they forget about the people, and they forget about that, the people-centered approach of actually how do you get everybody to not only play to their strengths, but in a way that's going to maximize their outcomes. And I think it's how do you keep it live on a day-to-day basis? And I think, it's cultural shift, right? I remember working at the start of my career, working in an organization where if you left early, and it was before 5, 6 o'clock, people used to say, "Oh, are you on half a day, or are you on holiday?" And it just doesn't help. And, it could be seen as a bit of a joke, but in reality, those people are driving home to pick their children up feeling incredibly guilty. So I think, to answer your question, it's opt in for flexible working. It's about, before you start tasks, understand. So, for example, in one of my assignments, I always knew that an individual needed to pick his children up between 3 and 4 p.m. So we never scheduled calls at that time. If I was going to review any of his work, I'd review it at that time, and the feedback would be waiting for him. And I think it's been really upfront around what does that individual need to thrive. Because if I put calls in, he's either going to be doing it in the car, he's not going to be concentrating, he's going to be stressed, I'm not going to get what I need. So I think it's about being bold up front around actually what are your boundaries and what do we need to put in place so we're both successful. Because, if he's out for an hour a day, what's the difference between being out at 3 to 4 versus being out 7 to 8 in the morning? It's just a different way of looking at how do you get the output done.
Yeah, and I think a lot of organisations get into that sort of short-termism, don't they? They want things that are going to happen in the next quarter, as opposed to the longer term. And I think it's trying to get organisations to think more long-term, and because anything you do with people, as much as it's important, it takes a lot longer to have an impact. It doesn't happen overnight, and as you know, companies get caught up in what the profits they have to deliver, and therefore they want people working tirelessly, and actually that's not sustainable, and that's the impact. So just going back to your foundations of your success, what are the key components that as you've reflected on that have helped you to be that individual that is making a difference, is helping people to be the better version of themselves? What other aspects of that would help other people in their sort of career right now? Almost some advice, I guess, in terms of suggesting that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's about being your authentic self. It's about showing up, being really clear on who you are. I think, one of the most heartbreaking moments for me was I'd worked for an individual for 6 months and never knew he had a family. And when you unpicked that, it was because he didn't want to be judged in the workplace for having children, and he wanted to be seen as super ambitious and somebody who could get everything done. So I think for me, it's around being authentic, being true to who you are. If you've got a childcare issue, say it, face into it. Find your allies at work who you can actually invest in and say, do you know what, I just need to stop right now, I'll be half an hour, I just need to nip out and do XYZ and I'll be back. So I think being really open and honest helps. I think, again, going back to doing the work you love, I think a lot of people and a lot of my friends who have struggled in the workplace since having children is because they don't like what they do, and actually they'd much rather be at home with the children. And when you, again, speak to them about do they really want to be at home with the children, they recognise how hard that would be. And actually it's the fact that they just want something that's more fulfilling for them. So I think do the work that you love is important. I think finding your own support network, again, really, really important. So again, I've been very, very fortunate to have very hands-on grandparents, a husband and a dad who's very involved. We've used childcare. We've, our circle of friends. Some mornings I just have to ring them to drop the kids off, and vice versa. So I think finding your support network both at home and in the workplace is important. And then I think overall, it's just not feel guilty. No day's going to be the same. Be the best version of yourself, both as a working mum and as a at home, and do what you can, and tomorrow you can start afresh.
You mentioned that purpose piece. When people feel they're doing something that really doesn't really resonate with them, that feel very fulfilled, and go back and become a mum, and perhaps that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, they want to do something, and it's finding that purpose. And you found yours, and it'd be helpful just to unpick how you got to that place where you realized what your purpose was that keeps you that energy, that drive, and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I was very fortunate to go on a Leading with Purpose course. And I remember going in thinking, oh, so, 48 hours, I'm going to come out with a fully fleshed purpose, and I'm going to be really clear, and, I'm going to have it printed on my wall, and it's going to guide me every day. I think what that course gave me was to really start to understand what it is that I love doing, and that was around working with people and solving big problems. I'm definitely not a business as usual person. I like change, and I like problem solving. And then I think it was around getting great satisfaction by seeing people grow. So whilst I didn't come out with that course with my 3, 5, 10 words that I could put up on my wall. It gave me that greater connection to what it is I love. And then very fortunate to have some executive coaching sessions that allowed me to really start to pull that together into a bit of a narrative and a clarity on what that purpose is. And that takes time. And I think, trial and error. I've done some jobs where absolutely not being against my purpose. I'm definitely not a individual who likes working in isolation. I get my energy from people. So I think it's about really understanding what makes you tick, understanding what makes you thrive, and also understanding what you don't like. I'm not a person you give a blank piece of paper to. I'm someone you give a challenge and I'll solve it. So again, I think it's understanding what is it you don't like, and what is it that you do like, and what is it that you love, and how do you get more of what you love. And people, I think what's great about the world we live in today is our skills are transferable, and you can switch careers, right? I worked in retail and I went into consultancy, and I think it's that ability to be able to try new things, and if it doesn't work out, actually, what have you learned, what are your skills, and how do you transfer it into something else?
Yeah, it's good to hear that the whole process of the purpose doesn't happen in a one session or whatever 2-day course you went on. It is an iterative process, and it does
Yeah.
take some time. Sometimes you get real clarity really quickly on certain
Mm.
aspects, but it does take some time. And I think people need to understand it's a process. And I do a lot of that with the work I do with people, and
Yeah.
it takes a bit of time. When you got that alignment, or that clarity of that, how did you then ensure that when the organizations you're going to work for align to that? Not completely exactly, but
Mm.
broadly. How did you go about that in terms of work, making sure?
Well, it's quite interesting actually. When I defined my purpose was the time I changed career, so I moved into consultancy, and then I guess I started my executive coaching training. So I think for me, the part around enabling individuals very much ties into my coaching practice. And I think the enabling organisations very much ties into the consultancy world. So actually, organisations go to consultants because they want solutions. I think you still have challenges where you're working with multiple stakeholders within organizations whose expectations don't align, and I think it's constantly drawing them back to their what did they set out to achieve, and how can we jointly get them there. So I think I'm very fortunate that both aspects of my purpose I can now do on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Julian.
No, that's fine. That's great. Codie, I've really enjoyed talking to you, and it's great all the insights you've shared, your experience about working mums and the challenges, but also how you've mitigated it. And it seems to me it's this mindset piece seems to be quite crucial. From a employer's perspective on having a different mindset with having people with children, but also as a working mum to overcome the challenges of guilt. Is there any other aspects of that mindset that enables you to do what you're doing and be that successful?
Oh, good question. Something I'm always drawn to is two quotes. One, my mum always saying, "The world's your oyster, go find it." So I think, when I find it challenging or tough, I've always got those words in my mind, the world's your oyster, go find your own solution. So that always drives me forward. And then I remember when I worked at Morrison's, there was one of the directors I worked for at the time who always said to me, shy Ben's getting out. And what he meant by that was, speak up and, have your voice heard. And if you don't think something's right, say it. And I think, I've lived by that quote ever since. And if he could hear this, he's probably laughing. I took it very literally. But I think, it's speaking up, right? We've all got a voice. And I think it's doing the right thing. If something doesn't sit with you right, say and go and try and solve it. And also, if you can't solve it yourself, go and invest it and find people who can help you. I think, I was working with somebody who was suffering with depression, and the policies weren't working for her, and she just needed time out. And actually, I broke through the policies and went and found her a solution. And actually, the workplace I was working at the time changed the policy as a result of it. So I think, being quiet's not always the right way. And, I'd probably say never the right way. Stand up for what you believe in and, try and make a difference, not only for yourself, but for others.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time today, Codie. Thank you for all what you shared. And if people want to connect with you, want to get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
I'd probably say on LinkedIn. So Codie James, you can find me on LinkedIn. But yeah, but thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it, and time's gone so quickly.
It does. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.